Hey, Clemson family, there is another commit, and this one comes out of the all-in cookout. There was some momentum going into it with Bryce Davis joining the team. Now it's linebacker Logan Anderson, and that fills a hole, really the last hole that had remained in that class for 2025.
I'm Daniel Shirley. We'll also talk about UVA and what we expect from the Clemson cornerbacks this year. But really, the big news of today is Clemson getting its first linebacker in the 2025 class.
Yep, that came down Friday, and we have got some stuff ready to go over with you. I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. It's going to be a pretty fact-filled episode between one commit and then a couple of previews of what to expect this year. Comment, chime in, tell us what's going on in your mind with all this. YouTube.com/Clemson Kickoff. That's the place where most people are going to see what you have to say. Drop it on the bottom of the video. You might want to subscribe to us there. You also could do us a favor, hit that like button. We don't make any money off of this podcast. We do it for fun. We do it because we want people to know more about Clemson football, and we hope that there will be more of a community of that, not just us two talking heads, but everybody really chiming in. And let's go ahead and chime in about Logan Anderson. He is an important addition to this class, if you ask me. Once again, the first linebacker to commit and takes the tally of the 2025 class up to 15 players, I believe. Right, Daniel?
Yeah, and I was looking at the composite, the 24/7 composite, which is kind of my go-to where I go to check rankings and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
They had Clemson 10th in this class, and I think that's about where we expect Clemson to be every year. Dabo Swinney makes a point to say that Clemson's never had the number one class, but then they kind of overperform what the rankings are. So, look, I think Sammy Brown's going to be a really good player. We've seen what the two Woodaz brothers are. We know what Barrett Carter is. We know what other guys who've come through that position are at Clemson at linebacker. But I do think he brings an element that this class needs, especially that position being the only linebacker in the class.
He will be coming to Clemson out of Fife, Alabama. Hope I'm saying that right. Do you know?
Yes.
Okay, very good. 6'2", 220 is his average among the four major recruiting services. That's what we like to deal with. Everybody's got a little bit different height, a little bit different weight. Really lauded for his speed. You can kind of see over here just how quick he is and what he's able to do, cover a lot of the field, moves around the field a lot there for his high school team, gets a lot done, both on defense and on offense. You could see in that first play that started this out, he was lined up very deep like a safety and came up quickly to attack the ball and make sure that carrier didn't get very far. He's able to get behind the line of scrimmage and make some tackles for loss, be disruptive back there. We don't like player comps, so I'm not going to make one here, but I think there are a few guys that you can think of when you watch him in Clemson history who have been very, very good for the program. I like to look forward more, and I think when you look at some guys moving on to the NFL or exhausting their eligibility coming up, what I like about Anderson is he's got such a nice broad skill set, and other guys do too in this room. When you look at guys who are going to be here a while, Sammy Brown, D. Creighton, Jamal Anderson, those are guys who have all different skill sets. And I think Anderson can kind of fit in around all of that pretty nicely moving forward once he's ready to hit the field.
Well, it's versatile. There's no doubt about that. And you can see that on the clips as, he's lining up as a traditional linebacker spot. He's lining up as an edge. He's lining up almost as a safety. Is he that Dorian O'Daniel kind of nickel slot guy? I mean, that we've seen, Isaiah Simmons, that kind of position. We'll see.
I'm not comparing.
I'm not comparing him to those two guys
right.
as players, but I mean, playing that role, we'll have to find out how Clemson will use him. But there's a lot of versatility in his game, and you definitely can see that.
Absolutely. In that list of 2025 commits, you can see he is the only linebacker right now. A couple of guys in the secondary, versatile again, Tay Harris, and who also is very active on social media with this class, loves to see guys committing, loves to see guys coming in. A very full defensive line in front of Logan Anderson, 2 tackles, 2 ends. So the defensive side of the ball is shaping up very nicely for 2025.
It is. I think the defense is in a good spot, right? I mean, we've seen what last year's class helped, how last year's class helped the defense. I think we're going to see this year's class be a huge help to the defense. And you mentioned Sammy Brown, and this class is going to be right there as well. So, Bryce Davis is a huge get. We talked about that the other day, and what he brings to the class. I think this is another step in the right direction.
And they're not done. I mean, there's going to be
Right.
more guys coming in. We don't know how soon that will be, but the All-In Cookout has seemingly produced one guy coming in ahead of time, and now at least one coming out of that class. There's some other prospects to follow, and then it'll be interesting to see how the coaching staff under Dabo Swinney decides to start watching for other guys they can add. And they're going to have to start thinking about, have to start thinking about rosters expanding at some point. We saw that news break this week. So I know that won't be for the 2025 season's roster. That is the year that the rule will start to take effect for recruiting, which my understanding means then that 2026 roster is the one that would be larger. But you sure do maybe look at an oversign or two and maybe delay a PWO for a year to get him in under scholarship. Maybe there's NIL money to work with to get guys in as walk-ons who are on the fringe. A guy who maybe was a late commit last year or the year before and sort of was we've got a spot, come on in. Maybe now that person is like, hey, we're going to try to fill this class with 4 and 5 star players, and then those 3 stars and 2 stars who you really want on the team. Maybe you find them some NIL money, ask them to walk on for a year. They're already in the program, ready to fill that spot when it becomes available.
And we don't know, Bill, the thing about the 105 roster limit, that doesn't mean you have to have 105 scholarships, right? That means you can't have more than 105 players on the roster, which we've seen schools do where they have 130 on the roster or 125, whatever, with 30 walk-ons. You just can't go over the 105, at least right now, to start the season. That's kind of what the thought is going to be. But that doesn't mean you can't still just stay 85 scholarships and have 20 walk-ons, or 85 full scholarships and 20 partial scholarships, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know what all that means yet. We don't know how each school is going to handle that, because each school is going to be able to handle it differently. So all of that stuff is, we've talked about these big changes in college sports. This is another huge one coming, and we just don't know how teams and schools are going to handle those yet.
Exactly. And it might not affect the 2025 recruiting class all that much, but it could, again,
Yes.
some of those little extra spots where you're not sure, do you want to take a guy? Is so and so maybe coming back for an extra year? What is all that going to happen? The other nice thing is finally all those COVID guys are going to start coming off the books, those extra years. And you love to see those guys get that opportunity. I think the question there is, how did the coaches plan for that the last 4, 5, 6 years? Now there's going to be one more little element of certainty that they can deal with. So let us know what you think of all of that, not just Logan Anderson, but what's in your future view as to how the roster is going to take shape for Clemson and for other programs. YouTube.com/Clemson Kickoff. As we get going with our analysis and commentary on Clemson positions, on Clemson's opponent later this year, tell us what you think. That this is the best place to do it. You'll reach the most people by commenting here on our YouTube version of this. And then we are also on social media as news breaks. ClemsonKickoff.com is our homepage. At Clemson Kickoffs, where you can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Threads, and I think Facebook is, there's a little mix. I think you can find us with Clemson Kickoff or Reign Supreme Alway on Facebook, the way I kind of set that up. I don't know what I was thinking when I did that, but here we are talking about the Tigers, and the room that we're going to get into is the cornerbacks. And to me, every year, the 2 rooms I have the most concerns about are offensive line and corners, just because the game is built that way, right? Pressure the passer, so it makes it tough on the offensive line. Run guys, try to get matchups at wide receiver, try to put guys in motion, try to split them wide, try to have 2 or 3 to the same side out wide. All these ways that offensive coordinators are scheming to get receivers open. It's a tough job for the cornerbacks, but to me, this year, Even with the departure of an NFL first rounder, I think I feel pretty good about the corners. And, you and I did a blind vote on ranking the positions going into the season, and cornerbacks fared pretty well.
I love what the Tigers have at this group. I think we both had them ranked highly. I may have had them number one as a position group. It starts with Avion Terrell. Love what he is. Love what he did last year as a freshman. But it all starts with Mike Reed, associate head coach of the Tigers. Really, Dabo Swinney's right hand man now, and number two. You could see him being a head coach at some point, somewhere along down the line, maybe even at Clemson eventually. I wouldn't mind that if that was the case, but
Right.
I think he's a really good cornerbacks coach. There's a reason why other schools have tried to get him and hire him for other jobs. And I just love what he brings to this team. And it feels like they always get the most out of their cornerback group, whatever that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the talent is, it feels like they get the most out of it. And this year, he's got a lot of talent to work with.
Yep, he seems to always know like who's the guy to step up. When one guy leaves, he has a way of finding. Cordray Tankersley. Were we high on Cordray Tankersley moving into a starting job? We were confident in him, but not like, oh my gosh, yeah, I can't wait to see him. Same for Ryan Carter. How did both of those guys do? They both did really, really, really well. He got Avion Terrell ready in such a hurry last year. Midway through the season, Terrell just basically took over one side of the field. And when you had Terrell opposite Wiggins, things were looking really, really good. I think this cornerback group needs to figure it out quickly, right? Whoever that's going to be. And again, the odds are that Mike Reed is going to be able to make that happen, put the right guys in the right places. It's going to make a big difference for the pass rush if that quick coverage is there. Quarterbacks can't just dump off on a short route when there is a pass rush. That's how you negate a pass rush in college football nowadays. I think these corners have the talent to stay on guys, especially if everybody's healthy. There's one guy in particular we'll mention in a couple of minutes here. This team can really do that, and we know how important the pass rush is not only to Wes Goodwin but to Brent Venables before him, and it's really a big spot of the Clemson defense and why it's able to excel.
It is. Look, I love you have to be connected. We hear coaches talk about that all the time. The pass rush has to be connected to the coverage. So, maybe some a little bit unknown in the pass rush. We'll find out how the season goes along and what that group can become. But it feels like this group can help that group find its way a little bit. So we'll see if that's the case.
Yep. The other thing they're going to have to do is the deep ball, or maybe not necessarily so much covering deep routes. I don't expect that to be a problem. But when a guy breaks away, who has saved Clemson twice on an occasion like that? And it's Nate Wiggins, right? Whether it's pass play, whether it's a rushing play, he has always just played the full length of the field, through the whistle. And someone's got to step up and be that guy again and have the speed to match.
Yeah, speed. I mean, you talk about speed. We saw what he did at the combine. And I mean, he ran just a blazing time at the scouting combine. And we saw it. Remember the North Carolina game,
Right.
The chase down play, the North Carolina game that kept Clemson in that game early. That could have been 14-0. And that game could have been a totally different game if he doesn't make that play. So those are big shoes to fill on the other side of the field away from Avion Terrell.
Yep. We'll talk about a little bit of the depth on this team, and one of those guys is Miles Oliver, but another one who may be a little farther along, or maybe have started out of the gate a little hotter, more accurately, is Brandon Strozier. And I know you've kept an eye on him.
Yeah, really talented guy. So we'll see, what he can become this year. He's going to have to step into a bigger role this year, but talent is there. I don't think there's any doubt that the talent is there, but what can he become? Got to continue to progress and grow. That's what we got to see from him this year.
Yep. And he will be battling for playing time against a couple of freshmen. We saw Tavoy Fegan in the spring out of Florida, managed to get a pick in that orange and white game, and he is nicknamed the seatbelt. So you got to figure he's got a chance to shine early. And we've already seen just a little bit of that under controlled conditions, at least.
Well, yeah, you don't cost somebody that, right? If you can't get the job done, you don't want to give them the seatbelt and then they don't do the job, because that can be trouble. So talent, man, the talent is there with him, and he got the spring to learn and to be in the system and to be in the weight room and to be in the nutrition room, all that stuff that we always talk about with that helps these early enrollees. Bill, I think cornerback is a place where you can play early. I do. It's, yeah, there's schemes you have to learn and all
Sure.
that, but it's, hey, if you can run and you can think a little bit, you can really contribute early as a freshman.
Well, and we'll find out on a couple of guys who are just going to hit the field in the fall. Now, Corian Gibson is one of them. He did enroll early. He was on campus in January, but he's been somewhat limited due to some injury rehab. I believe he had surgery, if I'm not mistaken. And then Ashton Hampton, who is a steal right out of Florida State's backyard, coming from Tallahassee. I believe he's got family ties to Michael Reed, and that was one of the factors that led him to campus. A lot of buzz around those two guys possibly being able to contribute, but not as much as you're hearing about Jaden Lucas, who is back once again recovering from injury. He did not participate in the spring game. He didn't play a lot last year. So we've always seen he's got that leaping ability, sort of like Andrew Booth, maybe. I hesitate to say it, maybe a little faster in the open field than Andrew Booth, although Booth had such quickness and coverage. This is the guy who I would love to see be able to start opposite Terrell and just put his athleticism on display.
Well, he's an experienced guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, Mike Reed said about Corey Gibson, he said, you want to see somebody run, watch that guy run. And
Yeah,
I think he called him Joker. I love when Mike Reed,
all right.
and Ben, my son Ben, pointed this out. He loves when Mike Reed comes up with these names to give to guys. But he can run, absolutely can run. But
Gibson.
we're also, Gibson. But I'm also hearing that Hampton is in line to play a lot and maybe be that other guy. So Jaden Lucas is going to have his hands full keeping these freshmen off the field. I don't think there's any doubt about that, Bill. That's a good group there of really young talent who can get the job done for the Tigers.
That's right. And then when you bring in the experience of Shelton Lewis, who played quite a bit last year, a little more
Right.
of a physical cornerback type. I don't want to come up with, you and I aren't big on player comps, but I mentioned Tankersley early. Lewis is certainly that guy who can make a hit in the open field, likes to hit. Maybe needs to work on coverage a little bit. We saw some rough moments in that bowl victory over Kentucky, but nothing that made me think, oh, this guy's got time to work. I mean, this is someone who, if he starts, I will be pretty confident overall in his ability to contribute.
Well, and maybe that's what you need on the other side, right? I mean, not that Avion Terrell's not physical, because he tackles really well, but sometimes that's the mix you need, is a more of a cover guy on one side, physical on the other. And we all know how much the passing offense is part of college basketball. You're probably going to need three cornerbacks on the field a lot. So need that guy in the slot to be physical with the slot receiver, knock him off his route a little bit, cover the tight end some. That could be Shelton Lewis's role. There's no doubt about that.
Yep, we could continue to see Khalil Barnes in that role, but I would be very happy if in a lot of situations we end up seeing Shelton Lewis as a third corner on the field rather than having a third safety or a third linebacker in that spot on the field. You talk about Terrell, boy, he just confirmed all my suspicions and hopes in the second half of last season that he's been around Michael Reed. He's obviously been around his brother, AJ Terrell, who was fabulous at Clemson, a very well spent first round pick by the Atlanta Falcons to bring him in, even though that was panned early on. He has since proven exactly why they had him rated so high and wanted to spend first round money to have him on the field. Avion has shown absolutely he's been paying attention because he was game ready very quickly.
He was, and it felt like they were searching, right, for that other guy on the other side of the field. And then when they went to Terrell and gave him his chance, boom, it just clicked and fit.
Yep.
And now it feels like he's that guy. So we'll find out, right? I mean, he's got to continue to grow too. You can't just live off what you did last year. But man, he feels like a guy. You hear Dabo Swinney say this all the time. He's about his business and he's a professional and he wants to be an NFL player. And if we continue to see that, I think you're going to see him continue to grow in the system.
Yeah, and this system is one where, again, guys have continually elevated and moved into new roles year after year under Michael Reed and done very well and come through for the Tigers. And I think we can expect that again. Is there going to be a drop off? I think if you lose a guy like Nate Wiggins, there's got to be some level of drop off that's just inevitable, right? But I think it's going to be fairly minor. I think one of the if there's going to be a problem in this room, it may be the schedule more than the talent. That there's going to be Carson Beck coming at them week 1, Aguilar and App State coming at them week 2. You're going to have McCall and NC State coming in very early as well, and then you're going to have Florida State with a quarterback that at least has a strong arm in DJ Uiagalelei. You know, we've seen what Uiagalelei can do. We've seen what Grayson McCall can do when he was in the Sun Belt with when he was healthy with Coastal Carolina and against Sun Belt competition, and even against BYU that one year, if you remember that. So
right.
You're going to have some very capable passers early in the year when you're asking these guys to elevate. I don't think that even if things are a little bit like that bowl game against Kentucky and Clemson is still winning those games, I wouldn't worry too much about you got to bench him, you got to go to the backup. Like, this is going to be a very capable room, and you can trust in the position coach to do the right things.
I just don't think we need to see the busts that we saw against Kentucky, the big play busts. And
some of
now,
that's inevitable, right? But
right. And
not
who
as
was
much.
it? We don't know who it was on. We're
Mhm.
not in the headset. We're not in the press box. We don't know who was supposed to be where. We don't know who jumped the wrong route, all that kind of stuff. I just don't want to see the big play bust that we saw against Kentucky.
None of us do, and you know, there's going to be some of that, but I don't think the
Absolutely.
corners there. I don't think the corners in this group are going to be terribly error prone. I think that they have earned a lot of respect early, and it
Yep.
is on them though to keep improving and keep getting that coaching and keep getting better. So youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. You can clash with us if you want to in your comments. Tell us what you think, but definitely get in there, and that's where people can see what's on your mind about the Clemson team. So let's go ahead and get into another opponent on the schedule. We have reached the Virginia game in our opponent previews on the 10 for 24 series, as we like to call them. You saw it on the screen there with the position previews as well in the Clemson locker room. What do you say about a Virginia team that brought in head coach Tony Elliott, really hoping for some significant improvement, and it just hasn't been there yet? And some of those things have involved some off the field things that really could not be controlled.
Yeah, just struggles. I just don't know. Right. I mean, you talk about a death and things that happen on that campus, that's out of your control. But the on the field build, you just watch them play and you think, wait, what are you doing? I mean, the kind of mistakes that they make, uh, you don't expect that from a Tony Elliott team. We know as Clemson fans how oriented, detail oriented Tony is when he was at Clemson and calling plays for, a couple of national championship teams. You don't expect to see the kind of mistakes that they made, but we'll see if they can in year 3 kind of turn this around and be a much better team.
I sure hope so. 6-16 since he got there, 3-9 last season. I believe 2-7. Gosh, I just had it, and here we are talking. I believe it was
In the ACC,
I believe it
one
was
and seven, 1-7
there
in
you
the
go.
ACC last year. Yeah.
Thank you. That's just no Wake's 1-7. I got Virginia at 2-6.
Oh, 2-6. Okay.
According to this, yeah. I really, quite frankly, thought Tony Elliott would be an even better head coach than an offensive coordinator, and it hasn't shown up in the record yet. But I also wouldn't say that Virginia has taken too big of a step back from where Bronco Mendenhall left the program on short notice, and that led to some staff breakup. It led to some guys heading the portal. They lose Brennan Armstrong. Eventually, they lose Robert Anaya at offensive coordinator eventually. So Elliott has been rebuilding both on the roster and with his staff. And I would really like to see him get the step forward that he deserves. You look at the defense, we'll start on that side of the ball. And you mentioned Jameer Carter is going to be leading that group up front on the line.
Yeah, he is. I mean, that's the group that is, he's a veteran guy, right? They've got some veterans up there, but I think it all starts with him. I just don't think that he's the guy that, I do think he's the guy when you go into a game, you say, okay, where is Carter? And we're gonna game plan for him up front. I think he's that good. And now we all know defensive line kind of depends on how good the guys around you are, because if not, a guy like Carter, a player like Carter, is going to get double teamed and kind of limited a little bit. So that's what I would think as an offensive staff, that you would really focus on him going forward. They've got some veterans around him, but I don't know that the talent and the depth are there for them to be so dangerous up front.
Yep, and especially as Clemson gets later into the schedule, if there are any injuries up front on that offensive line, you would expect to see Virginia maybe move Carter around a little bit, take advantage of some matchups, and try to get him into the backfield and disrupting things. Linebacker, we'll get into the back seven. James Jackson stands out in the middle of the field, and then a lot of transfers in that defensive backfield.
Yeah, several. That's the thing that really surprised me when I was looking at their roster, kind of looking at the depth chart where pieces fall. And again, when you look at depth chart projections, they can be a little bit off here and there, but a lot of transfers, and just overall on the depth chart, but especially in their secondary. Bill, they really struggled in the secondary last year, so they had to bring in some guys who've played before to help get that stuff turned around. A lot of busts. We talked about busts with Clemson in the Kentucky game, in the bowl game. Virginia had a lot of busts last year, so they had to get that straightened out by going into the portal.
Yep. And one of those guys, if I remember correctly, is Malcolm Green, who was very familiar to Clemson fans as having played, and I thought showed a lot of promise with the Tigers. I was kind of disappointed to see him go, as far as, not really getting to ever see him start for the Tigers. So if he's going to be able to help the Cavs, then so be it. And you wish him well. Another familiar face at tight end for Virginia, Sage Ennis, who another guy who's just solid and capable. And then you've got Chris Tyree at the wideout spot.
Chris Tyree, who Clemson fans know, played at Notre Dame, right? So Clemson has seen him up close and personal the last few years. And again, two transfers here. Mm-hmm. What do coaches do now when their roster is lacking? Yeah, you still recruit, but you go heavy into the portal when you're trying to have a quick turnaround. And that's what Virginia is looking for here. They don't want another 3-9 year. I think a bowl game is probably the goal. So they went heavy into the portal to try to get things turned around pretty quick.
Yep. Up front, more transfers on the offensive line. You'll have Drake Metcalf and Brian Stevens trying to restore a little order there and keep what I think will be a very aggressive Clemson front six. Four linemen, two linebackers probably will be the base scheme there. They will be aggressive in trying to get after the quarterback. Someone's going to have to pick up the blitz. It could be Kobe Pace. I always thought he was fairly decent at that when he was at Clemson. Hey, another familiar Tiger, just barely changing that shade of orange. And in his case, going to a guy who had a hand in his recruitment when Elliott was running backs coach.
Yeah, orange and blue as opposed to orange and purple, I guess. But, Metcalf and Stevens are both grad transfers, so veterans, guys who've played a lot of football. If you're going to go to graduate school at Virginia, you got to be pretty smart. So you would think they would be able to pick up the system. And in Kobe Pace, I always thought Kobe Pace was a really good player at Clemson. He was never going to be the guy. And maybe that's, the chance he gets at Virginia, but he was always a guy who you felt like was well liked in the locker room at Clemson, did his job, just was maybe out recruited, there, and wasn't going to get on the field as much as he wanted, but you'd like to see him go to Virginia and do well.
Yep. Who's going to handle the handoffs and throwing the ball to Sage Ennis and to Chris Tyree? Well, that kind of remains to be seen. It looks like a battle is shaping up between Anthony Calandria and Tony Muskett.
Yeah, Calandria played a lot last year.
Hmm.
You know, and when he did, I mean, he there were moments, and then there were moments, right?
Yeah,
So you you just wonder about what he can become. I think the talent is there. I mean, we talk about that a lot with Cade Klubnik trying to do too much, and I think that Calandria did that a little bit. I mean, Bill, I watched him play last year, and there were several times you go, man, this young man's got it. And then you watch him 5 plays later and go, don't do that. Not that,
that
right?
sounds familiar.
Yes, it does. But to like the elevated extreme of what Clemson fans saw the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But Tony Muskett played at Monmouth. He's a veteran guy. You know, I know Monmouth is a lower division, but we've seen those quarterbacks come in from lower divisions, you know, and have some success at these higher divisions. So, you know, we'll see what he can become. But he's a I think he's a really good player. I think he's got a chance to do some good things. Again, I think it's a veteran guy that Virginia needs. Right? He played some at Virginia last year. He was, you know, a little bit, but you know, played in 6 games. You know, he was banged up some, but he played a lot at Monmouth. So we'll see who's the starter. You know, going through this whole season for Virginia. Look, Muskett was there last year, but he just didn't get a whole season under his belt. Let's see who's the guy this year for Virginia.
Ooh, is this one when you put this one on the list, I'm like, yeah, we got to talk about it. But I'm such a Tony Elliott fan. This is tough for me to be objective about. I'm going to be biased. I do think it's too early for hot seat talk for Tony Elliott. But guess what? I also thought it was too early for hot seat talk with Jeff Scott a while back, and that proved not to be the case in Tampa. We'll see what happens in Charlottesville.
Well, and look, you and I will agree on this. The answer is yes. It's too early. But Bill, what you know, the world we live in now in college football. I mean, my kind of rule of thumb, as I've covered college football for the last 30 years and it's you know grown into covering the sport, is a coach should get one full cycle. And that's 4 years plus that hybrid cycle where you come in your first year and you don't even really get a full cycle. So that's 5 years that I think coaches should get. But college football fans are not that patient.
Right.
And now college football presidents are not that patient. So is it too early? Yes. The answer is absolutely yes. But that doesn't mean it's not going to start if they have another tough year.
No, and especially if the investment has been made in a lot of transfer portal, easy for me to say players. I mean, we never talk about the transfer portal, so it's understandable why I can't pronounce that. It's a brand new term. Nobody ever discusses it.
What's NIL? I don't know what this NIL stuff is.
That's going to ramp up the pressure. If you go out and you commit to bringing these guys in and getting them NIL deals to join your roster, because that's quite frankly what the competition is doing. Everybody's got to get into it if they want to land these guys, and that's what Virginia has chosen to do. Look, there's money in and around Charlottesville and Northern Virginia, and with the level of academic success that school has through the entire student body, there's going to be grads who are willing to say, hey, yeah, let's get this back to more of a heyday situation. Let's get this back to, you know, that big season that Bronco Mendenhall had, to the respect that George Welsh had years and years ago, you know, and Tony Elliott, despite some things again happening out of his control, may end up not being Cavaliers head coach all that much longer. And so we will see what happens. There's one way to quiet it all down, and that's to put it all together and make it happen. And I think Elliott is capable of that, and we'll see how he and his staff approach that challenge this year.
Look, I think he's a good coach. I mean, we've seen the success he had at Clemson, calling plays, and what he has meant to that program and what he's been a part of with that program. He didn't forget how to coach when he
No.
went to Virginia. Now, is he going to have the same success at there that he was part of at Clemson? No, they've never done that. They've never had that kind of success. I mean, I would have to see that before I'm going to believe it. But he's a heck of a coach, and he's probably even a better person. And so you would think at some point they're going to start winning games
that they shouldn't lose. Bill, that's been the problem. They lose these games that they have no business losing. And I mean to FCS programs, I mean to some of the lower level group, the lower level FBS programs. They should not be losing those games. If he gets that straightened out, I think you'll see them start to take the step to another level.
Yep. And, look, we're very early in the preseason here. ACC Media Days, as we record this, haven't even happened yet. So hopefully by the time these teams meet up later on, there's going to be a lot more optimism and a lot more positivity around the Cavs program than we can really justify giving right now, correct? I mean, just based on what we've seen the last couple of years. But again, that infusion of talent, things can get rolling in a hurry in the right direction, and you hope that they're going to be there. You hope they're not going to beat Clemson, though, right? So,
I would be shocked if that game's close.
Yeah.
Let's just say that.
No, exactly. And look, Tony Elliott is someone who I had hoped, if Saban had retired earlier and Sweeney had been lured back to his alma mater, Tony Elliott was, to me, the hands down choice to be, the internal guy, the lead internal candidate to lead the Clemson program. And so I really want to see this work well for him. And if not this opportunity, then hopefully the next one has a better foundation in place and just, better fortune moving forward. So youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. Tell us what you think about the Tigers as things are going to get late into the season. What are going to be, what are the things that you will look for as the season progresses? And this is the part of the schedule where Clemson really ought to be able to sort of get its sea legs back under it. If there have been some tough games, they should have been earlier in the year, and you don't want them to be, Stanford. You don't want them to be Wake Forest. You don't want them to be Virginia. And this is going to be that chance to sort of figure some things out. I think the second bye will be coming up right around this time. So you don't want any lackadaisical play going into or coming out of that second bye. You want incredible focus, and you want them to be able to respect that lineup that's going to be on the field from the guys in Charlottesville. So let us know what you think. Hit us up on Twitter as well. Had a listener the other day just track down my personal Twitter the other day, and that was cool. That was awesome to see. More people will see what you have to say if you put in a comment. youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. We love to exchange thoughts with you guys wherever you may find us. So we will keep this series going moving forward. If news breaks, we will bring you that. The All-In Cookout might have some recruiting news coming up, so we will be on top of any developments that happen there. Hopefully off that momentum of Bryce Davis committing to the Tigers, which we mentioned in our previous episode, also available at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff, believe it or not. So until our next episode, whatever it may be about, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.